The rain is merciless. A black car stops. A bruised daughter is delivered to a crime lord as if her death has already been agreed upon. Jane Whitmore walks into Marco DeLuca's office expecting pain, humiliation, maybe a grave. Instead, he lifts her chin, sees the fingerprints on her throat, and everything changes. In that one silent moment, a mother signs her own ending, because the man meant to bury the girl becomes the storm that buries the mother.
Objectified as disposable currency, Jane Whitmore was presented as human collateral, her existence bartered by her own mother to a Chicago syndicate chief. Her life, on a 24-hour timeline, was meant for a silent and unquestioned end. Yet, Marco DeLuca's observation of her bruised face created a fracture in his hardened exterior. The maternal betrayal thus became a catastrophic miscalculation. This examines the moment where criminal pragmatism collides with an unexpected flicker of humanity. A torrential downpour rendered Chicago's lights an abstract smear, mirroring Jane Whitmore's fragmented state of mind. Cuffed in a dark car, her physical restraints were a mere symbol of her deeper psychological captivity. The city became alien territory 3 days prior, marked by the final act of maternal violence. Flanked by anonymous muscle, she was no longer a person but a commodity, a living settlement for a debt. Her mother's words echoed as the transaction's insidious justification. "You're finally being of some use, Jane." Of some use. The phrase was an internal wound, tasting of humiliation and blood. The vehicle stopped at a deliberately nondescript warehouse, a facade concealing the nerve center of a criminal machine. Within Chicago, Marco DeLuca was not simply a leader. He was the system personified, a ruthless, untouchable figure. Jane, however, was a direct offering to this modern boogeyman. Released from her bonds and thrust into the storm, she stumbled but consciously refused to fall. To fall would signify a final surrender, a pattern she now instinctively fought. The building's interior was a stark contradiction. Polished floors and curated lighting signaled a world of refined brutality. Escorted down a seemingly endless corridor, her physiological fear was palpable. Yet her entrapment was a chronic state of being. The journey ended at an imposing oak door, which opened into a disarmingly civilized office, where a fire raged against the backdrop of the storm-battered city lights like dying stars. There, behind a mahogany desk, sat Marco DeLuca. He was younger than his legend, perhaps mid-30s, with dark hair, a chiseled jaw, and eyes like cold ash. His suit was a perfect charcoal gray. He observed silently as she was pushed into the room. "Leave us," he commanded, his quiet voice radiating absolute authority. When his guards hesitated, he simply repeated, "I said leave." The lock engaged. Jane stood dripping on his rug, awaiting the inevitable pain, humiliation, or a mercifully quick end choreographed by her mother's smiling pathology. The motive was a $2 million life insurance policy established months before. Jane's death was a necessary condition for her mother to collect, with mob involvement serving as the perfect, tragic, and profitable cover story. Marco DeLuca continued to watch her, his gray eyes conducting an intense scan of her face. It was not a predatory gaze, but an active perception, and after a lifetime of invisibility, being truly seen was profoundly disorienting. "Sit," he finally ordered. Her body, locked by trauma, refused to obey. He rose with the fluid grace of a predator. His physical presence was more formidable than she had imagined. As he neared, Jane flinched, a conditioned reflex ingrained by years of abuse. One braces for the blow, then endures it. But the blow never landed. Marco stopped, hands in his pockets, and catalogued her injuries with an unnerving focus, her split lip, the marks on her neck. "Who did this?" His voice, still quiet, now held a sharp, icy edge. Jane's mouth opened, but words failed her. Speech was a learned trap. I asked a question. It was a statement of fact. My mother, she whispered. The two words hung in the air, fragile yet possessing immense weight. Marco's expression was unchanged, save for the clenching of his jaw. He reached out slowly, as one would approach a frightened animal. His touch on her chin was startlingly gentle, causing her to gasp as he tilted her face to the light. She held her breath as he inspected her injuries with the dispassionate eye of an expert assessing damage, noting every mark and the terror in her eyes. When he let go, she nearly collapsed. "Sit," he repeated. This time, she complied. She fell into a leather chair, her body racked with tremors. Marco returned to his desk and poured an amber liquid from a decanter, placing the glass before her. "Drink this." Her protest was cut short. That was an order. With trembling hands, she took the glass. The whiskey's burn was a clarifying shock to her system, sharpening the blurred edges of her fear. He watched with total patience. "Why are you here?" Jane's voice was a wrecked whisper. "You tell me," he countered, leaning back. "I was informed a payment was being delivered to clear your mother's debt." "What I was not informed," he continued, "was that she intended to use her own daughter as the collateral." A broken, harsh laugh escaped Jane. "Payment? Is that her term for it?" Marco's eyes narrowed. "What would you call it?" "A hit," she stated, the word flying out. "There is a life insurance policy on me for $2 million. She requires me to cease breathing so she can collect." The room became utterly still, the air growing cold and heavy. "Say that again," he commanded, his voice dangerously quiet. She then detailed the entire plot, the policy, the staged death, and her mother's chilling smile as she explained that no one ever questions a death linked to Marco DeLuca. She explained how the beatings had worsened over the past month, a calculated effort to build a believable narrative of an abused woman meeting a predictable fate. She spoke of years of induced isolation, of being shaped into someone quiet and disposable. When she was done, Marco DeLuca was like a statue carved from stone, his eyes burning with a cold, controlled fire. "She brought you to me so I would kill you," he stated. It was not a question. Yes. "And you still came." Jane's laugh was a hollow, empty sound. Where else was there to go? She ensured I had no resources, no allies, no one who would believe my word against hers. For the first time, she held his gaze unflinchingly. "So, yes, I came, because at least this provides a conclusion." Marco rose from his chair so abruptly that Jane flinched again. He noticed. He always noticed. He moved to the window, staring out at the rain-lashed city. "Do you have any idea who I am?" he asked. "You are the head of the DeLuca family. You control half of Chicago. You eliminate people." She recited it like a memorized list. "Correct," he replied, turning to face her. "I am all of those things, but I do not kill women. And I absolutely do not kill women who are delivered to me bruised and broken like a piece of meat." Jane stared, completely disoriented. This contingency was not in the script she had prepared for. "Then what are you going to do with me?" Marco's smile was sharp and predatory, entirely devoid of warmth. "I am going to make your mother regret her existence, but first I have a question for you, and I require the absolute truth." She could only nod, her throat tight. "Do you want to live, Jane?" The question struck her with physical force. In 26 years, no one had ever asked for her input. Wanting was a language she had never been taught to speak. The word broke apart. I honestly don't know. He returned to his desk, his fortress of dark wood, and leaned against it. This is the arrangement. You will stay here tonight. You will be given food, a clean bed, and a doctor. Tomorrow, with a clear head, I will ask you that question again. If the answer is yes, if you choose life, we will devise a strategy together. Why? The word tore from her. Why are you doing this? I am a complete stranger, a nobody. You are a woman who walked into the lion's den because you saw no other escape. That requires a courage most people lack. A brief flicker of something akin to warmth crossed his face. And your mother made a grave error in judgment, thinking she could use me as her weapon. Being played is a personal matter, so consider this a professional courtesy and the settling of a grudge. Jane's hands began to tremble again, but this time the source was not terror. It was a new, almost frightening sensation. It was hope. He pressed a button and the door opened. A woman in her mid-40s entered, her eyes sharp, dressed in severe black. Not a soldier, but something else entirely. Elena, Marco instructed, take Jane to the guest suite. Procure what she needs and summon Dr. Ramos. Elena's eyes swept over Jane in a quick, cold calculation. At once! On unsteady legs, Jane stood. She looked at Marco, the man slated to be her executioner, who was now offering her sanctuary, vengeance, a choice. I can't figure you out, she breathed. A ghost of a smile materialized on Marco's lips. Perhaps you will, perhaps not, but survival will be the framework for the attempt. Elena then escorted her through corridors that seemed lifted from cinema. Plush carpets consumed every footfall. The art adorning the walls represented more capital than Jane had ever witnessed. The quiet in this place was a fortress, not a crypt. An elevator ascended 3 levels in silence, its doors parting to reveal a room that stole the air from her lungs. This suite rendered her small apartment with her mother a forgotten closet. Expansive windows framed the city, fast bed promised oblivion, and the bathroom was a chamber for 3. It was all impeccable, tasteful, and sterile. You will find necessities in the closet, Elena stated, her tone efficient, yet not devoid of compassion. Attire, toiletries. For any other request, use the telephone beside the bed. Dial 1. It will be answered. Jane could only offer a stunned nod. As Elena reached the doorway, she paused. The physician will arrive in 20 minutes. She is private. She will pose no questions you do not wish to entertain. A whispered, "Thank you," was the only response Jane could summon. Elena's demeanor softened, a brief flicker of maternal warmth crossing her features. You are secure within these walls. Every expectation you hold, every narrative you were conditioned to accept is a fabrication. Marco De Luca is a man of complexities, but he does not target the innocent. Then the door clicked shut, leaving her in total isolation. Standing in the room's epicenter, rainwater forming a small pool on the polished hardwood, the architecture of Jane's composure finally disintegrated. She reached the bathroom just as the sobs erupted. Primal, animalistic sounds clawing their way from a vault sealed for a lifetime. She collapsed onto the cool tiles, clutching her knees, and wept until the wellspring of her grief ran dry. The silence that came after was a new entity, not hollow but tranquil. As she shed her drenched dress, her own reflection in the mirror arrested her movement. The bruises were a far more brutal tapestry than she had understood, vicious constellations of violet and yellow across her torso, her arms, her neck, a split lip, a swollen eye. She was the cartography of a battle. This is the result of her actions. This is the ordeal she subjected you to. A bath seemed less arduous than a shower. To stand required too much resolve. The water was nearly searing, a clean shock of pain, but she submerged herself, allowing the heat to penetrate to the bone. She remained there until the water grew cold, until her skin was puckered, until some faint ember of vitality returned. The doctor appeared with precise timing, a woman in her 50s with discerning eyes and a confident manner. Her examination was methodical, requesting consent before each action, cataloging the injuries in professional silence. 2 fractured ribs, extensive contusions, mild dehydration, wounds that would, in time, mend. You possess a strength that belies your appearance, Dr. Ramos observed. Many individuals would have fractured long before reaching this point. Jane felt not strong, but like fragile glass held intact by sheer defiance. Still, she acknowledged the doctor's assessment with a nod. After the physician departed, Elena returned with a simple meal of soup and bread. Jane consumed it out of necessity, the flavor an abstract concept. Afterward, Elena cleared the tray and lowered the lights. You require rest, she advised. Tomorrow will be demanding. Jane slipped between sheets that were as supple as she had imagined. The sensation of being an imposter, a specter in another's existence, should have been crushing. But what she experienced instead was a feeling she had long since forgotten. Safety. She was consumed by sleep instantly, the drumming of rain against the window, a hypnotic rhythm, the city, a distant nebula of light. And for the first night in an eternity, her dreams were not of drowning. Dawn arrived with a muted glow and the aroma of coffee. Jane bolted upright in bed, her heart pounding before memory asserted itself. She was not in her mother's prison, nor in some transient motel. She was here, inside Marco DeLuca's tower, this veritable fortress. She pushed herself up, the sharp protest from her side a visceral link to reality. A knock at the door made her recoil. "It is Elena," a voice announced. "Enter." Elena came in bearing a tray with coffee, fruit, and pastries, placing it on the nightstand. "Mr. DeLuca wishes to speak with you once you have eaten, at your convenience." "What is the time?" "Slightly past 9 o'clock." She had slept for almost 12 hours. She ate under Elena's observant gaze, understanding that refusal was not a viable option. The coffee was potent, the fruit was vibrant, the pastry was exquisite. Her system absorbed the nourishment like parched earth accepts rain. When she finished, Elena opened the wardrobe. It was filled with clothing in her size: denim, soft pullovers, simple dresses. "How did you—" "Mr. DeLuca is exceptionally thorough." Elena offered her a pair of jeans and a gray sweater. "Please dress, I will wait outside." Jane changed with haste, stealing one more look at her reflection. The bruises remained, but they seemed less savage as the morning light. She gathered her hair, washed her face, and attempted to project an image of composure. It was an utter failure, but the effort was made. Elena led her down once more through a new series of corridors to a sun-filled room that was a world apart from the previous night's office. This space was intimate, personal. Bookshelves lined one wall. A large sofa faced a private terrace. At a small table, Marco DeLuca was perusing a newspaper, a cup of coffee at his side. He glanced up as she came in. "Sit." And with that, Elena vanished. Jane took a chair. Marco folded his newspaper with a crisp motion and set it aside. His expression was unchanged, still analytical and measuring. "How do you feel?" as if I were struck by a truck. Blunt and accurate, he poured a second cup of coffee and pushed it across to her. Dr. Ramos has confirmed you will make a complete recovery. The ribs will require several weeks. Jane wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic. Why are you undertaking all of this? I explained last night. No. The true motive. What is your price? Her tone was now harder, possessing a new edge. No one provides this level of assistance for free. Marco leaned back, folding his arms. She steeled herself for his anger, but a faint smirk touched his lips. You are far more astute than you present. I had no alternative. Naivete in my mother's world is a fatal condition. A valid point. He lifted his cup. This is the truth, Jane. Your mother attempted to betray me. She orchestrated a scenario to incriminate me in your murder, enriching herself as I absorbed the consequences. This displeases me. So yes, there is a price. I require your cooperation to ensure she faces retribution, but I will not compel you. You can leave through that door this instant, if you choose. I will furnish you with funds, a new identity, an opportunity to disappear. There is no catch. Jane's throat constricted. And if I remain, then we shall make her lament every action she has ever taken. His voice lowered, becoming glacial. Together. The word remained in the air, a solemn covenant. Jane lowered her mug. Her hands trembled again, not from fear but from fury, a white-hot rage she had spent an entire life suppressing. What would be the method? Marco's smile was purely predatory, devoid of warmth. First, we publicize your survival. We establish that you are under my protection. That act alone is a declaration of war. Second, we unearth evidence of her transgressions, every deception, every falsehood. And third, he paused, his eyes glinting, we dismantle her reputation before the high society she reveres. We will strip away everything she holds dear. Her name, Jane whispered. Precisely. She will retaliate against me. It is her nature. Let her try. The statement was like silk drawn over steel. This time, she will contend with an opponent who understands how to win. Jane studied the man before her, a criminal, a killer, a figure who should inspire terror. Yet in his proximity, she felt a dangerous surge of her own agency. Why do I trust him? Because he has been transparent with me, and because I recognize he is my only path forward. He leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. So I will ask again, Jane, do you wish to live? The answer was immediate. Yes. Good. Marco rose, extending his hand across the table. Then let us begin. Jane accepted his hand. His grip was firm, a warm, grounding anchor. And for the first time in 26 years, she felt the contact of an ally, not an adversary, perhaps even a friend. The rain had ceased. Beyond the window, Chicago sparkled in the morning sun, clear and filled with potential. Jane had perfected the art of being invisible, of being silent, a phantom in her own life. But in that instant, her hand in Marco DeLuca's, something fundamental within her shifted. She was finished with fading into the periphery, and her mother was completely unaware of the tempest that was about to break. The training commenced that afternoon when Marco guided her to a smaller, more private chamber with a glass wall overlooking a serene garden. In the room's center stood a table entirely consumed by files, photographs, and legal documents. Jane recognized her mother's script on several items and felt her stomach plummet. Marco's voice was low as he gestured to a chair, inviting her to sit. She took it, gazing at the organized chaos. What is all of this? The architectural plan of your mother's life. Every illicit transaction, every deception, every instance she prioritized profit over principle. He sat opposite her, slid a folder forward, and opened it. Inside lay the proof. Bank records, images of endorsed checks, wire transfer receipts. The woman was embezzling from the charity she managed. 10,000 here, 20,000 there. Some small enough to evade notice, yet substantial enough to finance a clandestine lifestyle. Jane's hands tightened into fists. The narrative of a failing charity was a carefully maintained fiction, a lie designed for subjugation. Marco pushed another file across the table. Her mother operated 3 separate accounts through shell corporations, held funds in the Caymans, and owned a Miami condo purchased with laundered money. He tapped a specific document. Your mother has a net worth of nearly $8 million, all acquired while she convinced you of your poverty. Jane's world began to destabilize. She grasped the table, a fire of betrayal igniting in her soul. 8 million earned while she wore 3 repeating outfits, subsisted on ramen as a luxury, and absorbed the constant poison that she was only a burden. Why? The question was a faint whisper. What was her reason? To maintain absolute control. Marco's voice was devoid of warmth, the tone of a man familiar with this brand of cruelty. Wealth creates options. Options create power. She deliberately left you with neither. Jane watched him, her vision clouded by tears she fought to contain. At the life insurance policy? Marco produced another, much slimmer folder. It held a copy of the contract. $2 million, with Jane as the insured party and her mother as the sole beneficiary. The policy had been initiated only 4 months prior. She enacted this just after your 26th birthday, Marco explained. The point at which you are no longer legally considered her dependent. Old enough that your unexpected death would not trigger immediate suspicion. This was all her design. The statement was not a query, but a horrifying realization. The truth coalesced with chilling clarity. The escalating abuse, her mother isolating her from others, all constructed a narrative where her demise would be tragic, yet unsurprising. How long have you been aware of this? Since last night. My investigation began after you lost consciousness. Marco shut the file. Your mother contacted a business partner of mine 2 weeks ago, mentioning a large upcoming payment and inquiring if I would accept an alternative form of collateral. I demanded she deliver it personally. I needed to see precisely what she was willing to wager. And I was the trade? Correct, but she made a critical miscalculation. Marco's expression turned glacial. She presumed I was the type of man who avoids due diligence, that I would perceive you merely as an asset. She was profoundly mistaken. Jane stared at the documents arrayed before her, the irrefutable proof of her mother's treachery. One part of her wished to avert her gaze, to erase the knowledge, but another part, the one that had accepted Marco's hand that morning, wanted to etch every single detail into her memory. What is our next course of action? She asked. For now, we hold this information. We do not reveal our hand, Marco said, consolidating the files into a single damning stack. Our first priority is to prepare you. Your mother will begin searching for you. And when she arrives, you must be capable of meeting her gaze without shattering. I will not shatter. The words were a vow, sharp and laced with venom. Marco observed her, his head tilted slightly. You believe that now, but she has spent 26 years constructing a prison inside your mind. One does not simply exit such a confinement. Then teach me how, Jane countered, her eyes locking with his. You gave your word we would face this together, so instruct me. A subtle change occurred in Marco's expression. It wasn't admiration, but something akin to it. Very well, lesson 1. Cease apologizing for your own existence. I don't do that. You do. You recoiled when Elena entered. You drew back when I moved your chair. You expressed gratitude for basic human decency. His tone was authoritative, yet not unkind. You have been conditioned to occupy minimal space. I require you to become substantial. Jane swallowed against a rising tightness in her throat. I don't know how. We begin with fundamentals. Marco rose, motioning for her to follow. Traverse this room. Do not slouch. Keep your chin elevated. Move as if you command this entire building. The instruction was straightforward. Its execution was not. Jane stood, her posture already defaulting to a defensive curve as she took a hesitant step, then another. Midway across, she found her gaze fixed on the floor and willed her head upward. The position felt unnatural, vulnerable, as if inviting an attack. Again, Marco commanded. She walked back, attempting to maintain a straight spine, and failed. Again. This continued relentlessly. For 20 solid minutes, Marco compelled her to cross the room until her lungs burned and her legs trembled. Each time she hunched, he corrected her stance. Each time her eyes dropped, his voice sliced through her concentration. The process was exhausting, humiliating, and strangely freeing. At last, he raised a hand. Improved, not flawless, but improved. Jane sank into a chair, her breathing ragged. Does this task ever become less difficult? In time. At this moment, you are overriding a lifetime of psychological conditioning. That requires patience. Marco poured her water from a nearby pitcher. But you are already displaying more resilience than most individuals would. Most individuals were not raised by my mother. A valid point. He offered her the glass, and that is precisely why you will endure what is to come. Jane drank, the cool liquid a balm on her throat. And what is coming? You will learn the art of retaliation, not only physically, though that will be covered, but with your words and your presence, with the power to look someone directly in the eye and convey that you are not afraid. Marco leaned against the table, his arms crossed. Fear is your mother's primary weapon. We are going to disarm her. How? By making you inviolable. The word resonated in the space, a conceptual armor. Inviolable. It seemed an impossibility, but no more so than conspiring against her mother from within a crime lord's sanctuary. When will she learn that I survived? Jane inquired. Shortly. I am arranging for a message to be dispatched this afternoon. Marco's smile was as sharp as a stiletto. Nothing overt, merely a subtle indication that her most recent transaction did not proceed as anticipated. Jane's heart began to race. She will come to this place. It is likely, and when she does, you will be prepared. He pushed away from the table. Let's go. There is an individual I want you to meet. They exited the room, traversing more corridors. Jane found herself constructing a mental blueprint of the compound before they entered an elevator and descended 2 levels. As the doors slid open, they emerged into what appeared to be a private gymnasium. It was filled with weights, punching bags, and training mats. In the center of it all, A woman in fitness attire was executing a sequence of incredibly brutal kicks. She paused upon seeing them, her breathing heavy, her dark hair secured in a taut braid. She appeared to be in her 30s, was composed of sheer muscle, and bore the faint scars that spoke of a violent history. "Jane, this is Risa." Marco introduced them. "She will instruct you in the art of staying alive." Risa's gaze swept over Jane from head to toe, a purely professional assessment. "Have you ever been in a genuine fight before?" "Not one that I won." "Excellent. That means you have no poor habits for me to correct." Risa picked up a towel, dabbing sweat from her brow. "We begin with principles, your stance, your movement, and how to throw a punch without fracturing your own hand. Understood?" Jane could only nod, her throat suddenly constricting. "Good. Go get changed. There is equipment for you in the locker room." Riza indicated a door on the far side of the gym. "And leave your fear behind. It has no value to you now." Marco placed a hand on Jane's shoulder for a moment, a firm, reassuring gesture. "You can do this." Jane was not convinced he was correct, but she proceeded to the locker room regardless, changing into the perfectly fitted training garments waiting for her. She walked back out feeling like an absolute imposter. Risa was poised, her attention fully focused. "All right," Risa said. "Show me your combat stance." Jane was clueless as to what that entailed. She simply stood, shifting her weight onto one foot, her arms hanging limp. Risa began to circle her like a predator. "You require stability. Feet shoulder width apart, knees bent, hands raised to guard your face." Risa modeled the position and Jane mimicked it. "Better. Now, when an assailant seizes you, what is your initial reaction?" "Flee." "Incorrect." "Well, not entirely. Fleeing is optimal, but when it's not an option." Risa moved with startling speed, her hand clamping around Jane's wrist. Jane's instinct was to pull away, causing her to stumble over her own feet. "You see, you retreat. That is the expected response. Instead, you advance, you close the gap, and you eliminate their leverage." She guided Jane through the counter move in slow motion. Jane attempted to replicate it, her mind warring with 26 years of conditioning to recoil from danger. It felt counterintuitive, as if she were walking into a snare, every nerve screaming for her to do the reverse. "Again," Risa commanded. They practiced it repeatedly. Simple maneuvers, basic defensive blocks, methods to break an aggressor's hold. With each impact, Jane's ribs ached, but she clenched her jaw and absorbed it. Risa was an unwavering machine, adjusting her form, pushing her to her absolute limit but never beyond. An hour later, Jane was drenched in sweat, her entire body trembling from the grueling session. "We are finished," Risa stated brusquely. "You performed better than I anticipated," Jane gasped. "It feels as though I was struck by that truck again." Risa offered a rare grin. "That indicates it's effective. Shower, eat. We resume tomorrow." Jane hauled herself to the lockers, stripped off her saturated clothes, and allowed the hot water to numb the pain in her muscles. When she emerged, Elena was present with a fresh change of clothing, a silent aid Jane was beginning to value highly. An invitation from Mr. DeLuca was delivered by Elena. "Dinner, 7 o'clock, main dining room." For Jane, the simple command triggered a cognitive dissonance. "Dinner?" Elena's counsel, "Don't overthink it," was paired with a cryptic assurance. "His bite is rarely fatal." A veiled commentary on this world's power dynamics. The setting itself defied Jane's expectations of intimidation, a study in restrained opulence, not garish display. At a table meant for 12, places were laid for only 2. Marco was present, engrossed in his phone, acknowledging her with Reese's assessment. "You don't quit, that's good." As Jane took a seat, she countered with self-deprecation. "She probably also said I'm a train wreck." He corrected the term. "She said you're a blank slate. There's a difference." As he poured the wine, Marco articulated the distinction. A blank slate can be molded. A train wreck is just a loss. The meal arrived via a previously unseen door presented by Elena. It was not an instrument of dominance, but of restoration. Simple pasta, bread, and salad. His instruction, "Eat," carried an unexpected gentleness. "You earned this." A profound hunger surfaced as Jane took her worst bite. A sound of involuntary contentment drew a genuine laugh from Marco. "Good enough?" he asked. Her reply spoke of deep deprivation. "I can't remember eating anything this real." His response was a promise of a new paradigm. "Get used to it. Rosa's been my cook for 10 years. She'll be personally offended if you leave a single bite." A weighted silence descended as they ate, a vacuum Jane expected to be filled by interrogation. But he simply ate and refilled her glass, letting the quiet hang between them. The ambiguity became unbearable for her. "Why are you being nice to me?" Marco paused. "You think this is me being nice?" When she affirmed, he deconstructed the gesture. "This is just business. You're no good to me, broken." He then clarified the deeper dynamic. "But if you're asking why you're not just another pawn on my board, it's because I don't need to. Your endgame is my endgame. We want the same thing. Why make it messy?" Jane noted this philosophy was an anomaly in his world. "I'm not most guys," he stated, his gaze like steel. He then articulated a personal code that distinguished between types of suffering. "I don't get my kicks from hurting people who don't deserve it. Your mother earned her karma. You didn't." The statement struck a deep chord. "I don't know how to do any of this," she confessed. "You're handling it," he countered. She admitted her fear, which he reframed as a tool. "Good. Terror keeps you sharp like a whetstone, but don't let it control you. You've got more fight in you than you know." Her voice cracked with disbelief. "Everyone keeps saying that, but I don't feel it. I feel like one wrong move and I'll just fall apart." His response was one of brutal pragmatism. "Then fall apart. But do it here, behind these walls, not out there where she can see it." This stark honesty resonated more than pity. In him, she saw not a savior, but a fellow survivor. The insight prompted a quiet question. "Did you have someone who taught you all this?" Marco's expression became a blank canvas. After a moment, he revealed the source. "My father. His lessons weren't gentle, but he got the job done." Asked if his father was like him, the reply was a single chilling word. "Worse. He ruled by fear. I learned quick that fear's a weak foundation. It only works until people stop being afraid." "So that's our plan? To make my mother afraid?" Jane asked. "No," Marco corrected, a thin smile forming. "Our plan is to make her irrelevant. Fear gives her power. We're going to take all of hers away." This concept, not revenge, but erasure, was a form of profound justice that resonated within her. It was the perfect inversion of her mother's campaign to render Jane invisible. After the meal, Marco escorted her to the elevator, his demeanor once again unreadable. "Rest," he advised. "Tomorrow's gonna be harder." Her question of harder how was met with deliberate ambiguity. "You'll see." She ascended, the closing doors obscuring his enigmatic figure. In the solitude of her room, she collapsed on the bed. On the nightstand lay a relic from her former life, a cracked phone, silenced out of fear days ago. Now a new imperative compelled her to confront it. With a trembling hand, she powered it on. The device awoke with a history of pursuit. 17 missed calls and 12 texts from her mother. The messages were a study in escalating manipulation, from imperious demands to shaming. The final text from that morning was a direct threat. "I know where you are. This won't end well for you." A cold dread took root in her stomach as she reread the words until they blurred. The conclusion was inescapable. Her mother knew. A sharp knock on the door broke her paralysis. It was Marco, his expression grim, a tablet in his hand. "Your mother just made her move." He displayed the screen, revealing a social media profile with 50,000 followers. The post featured a photograph of a younger Jane, her smile a constructed facade, beneath a caption portraying a shattered mother searching for her unwell child who had been gone for 3 days. It was a masterclass in public manipulation, weaponizing sympathy with hashtags like "help find Jane" and "missing person." A torrent of digital empathy flooded the comments, with strangers offering prayers and sharing the fabricated tragedy. Jane's hands tightened into fists. "She's playing the victim?" "Yep, it's what she does best," Marco confirmed, lowering the tablet. He outlined the predictable narrative her mother was spinning, one that would cast Jane as unstable and her reappearance as a rescue. "So, what's our move?" Jane asked. "We let her set the stage. We let her think she's holding all the aces." A cold, sharp smile formed on his lips. "And when she has the biggest audience, we're gonna pull back the curtain and show them the monster." "When do we do that?" "Soon!" "But you need to be ready first." He handed her a heavy, formal business card. "Dr. Levin is a therapist, a specialist in situations like this. Your appointment is 10 o'clock tomorrow." Jane's defensiveness flared. "You think I need a shrink?" Marco gently reframed her wound. "I think you've been hurt. There's a difference." He argued from a tactical perspective. "You can't win this war if you're still carrying the baggage from the last one. Dr. Levin will help you put it down." Her pride resisted, but a deeper truth acknowledged the poison still coursing through her system. "Okay," she whispered in surrender. "Good," Marco said, pausing at the door. "Jane, you're holding it together better than you think. Don't forget it." He left before she could respond. As she leaned against the closed door, her phone buzzed with another message from her mother. "You cannot escape me." Jane looked at the text, then with a chilling calm, typed a 2-word reply. "Watch me." She hit send before doubt could surface, then powered off the phone. Dawn arrived too quickly, announced by Elena with a breakfast tray, a quiet reminder of her scheduled appointment. She moved through the morning mechanically, the normalcy of wearing jeans feeling alien as she tried to wall off thoughts of the coming session. Dr. Levin's office, a 20-minute drive away, was in a discreet building that radiated quietude. A woman in her 50s, who introduced herself as Sarah, greeted her with kind eyes. As Jane sat, Sarah acknowledged the referral. "Marco set this up. He gave me the basics, but I need to hear it from you, in your own words. Why are you here?" And Jane, raised in a culture where truth was a weapon, began to speak. She unburdened herself of everything: the systematic control, the engineered isolation, the power of a single look to obliterate her sense of self. Sarah listened with clinical empathy, her expression calm, When Jane fell silent, the therapist offered a diagnosis. What you're describing is a textbook case of systematic psychological abuse. Your mother built a cage around you designed so you'd never want to leave. She then offered a powerful reinterpretation. The fact that you're even sitting here proves you're way stronger than she ever wanted you to be. Jane's throat tightened as she voiced the disconnect. I don't feel strong. Sarah then defined courage not as fearlessness, but as action in the presence of fear. She managed Jane's expectations, noting the path would be difficult, but that the first step, choosing to stay and fight, was already taken. This reframing struck a chord. For the next hour, the session became tactical. Sarah provided Jane a cognitive toolkit, grounding techniques for panic, strategies to separate the internalized abuser's voice from her own, and a new blueprint for building a self not founded on fear. I want to see you twice a week, Sarah concluded. More, if things get heavy, it's gonna get worse before it gets better, especially when you confront her. Acknowledging the imminent timeline she promised, we're gonna get you ready together. Sarah offered a card with her number, a constant line of support. Jane took it like a lifeline. Thank me, Sarah said, when you're looking back on all this chaos from a safe place. Returning to the safe house, Jane found Marco in his office, his face like granite as he conducted a phone call. He gestured to a chair and she sat, catching fragments of his parallel war. Her proposition was met with utter disinterest. The answer was a foregone conclusion. A pregnant silence followed. He did not broker agreements with those who would traffic their own blood. Another moment of heavy stillness. His ultimatum was simple. Any further contact would result in her public unmasking as the monster she was. The phone was slammed down, a punctuation of finality. My mother, Jane's query was barely audible. Her attorney, he clarified. It seems she wished to negotiate, to name a price for your retrieval. A harsh, mirthless laugh escaped Marco, framing her as some piece of unclaimed cargo. Jane's hands tightened into weapons. What was your reply? That she could find her own way to damnation. Marco pressed his fingers into his skull. The initial move had been made. The narrative online was already escalating. A search for you is underway. She has engaged law enforcement with the missing person claim. Can she force me to return? You are 26, he stated. Legally, there is no foundation. But she is constructing a fiction where you are mentally frail, that I have manipulated and abducted you. Any story that casts her as the grieving, blameless victim. Jane recognized the familiar vice of terror closing around her heart. So, what is the strategy? Marco's gaze met hers, conveying absolute gravity. We will systematically prove her falsehood, and we will do it with such conclusiveness that recovery is impossible. How? He pushed a file across the table. It contained an opulent invitation, its gold script embossed on heavy cardstock, for the annual Chicago Children's Foundation Gala, her mother's chosen stage, where she performed the role of the city's foremost philanthropist. It is in 2 weeks, Marco said without inflection. Your mother will be in attendance, as will 500 of Chicago's most powerful figures, alongside a cohort of journalists. Jane felt her heart begin to hammer against her ribs. You expect me to attend? I expect you to appear and allow them to witness you. Unharmed, sane, and following that, we will allow them to witness her. A smile touched Marco's lips, yet it was composed of cold certainty and sharp edges. You expressed a desire to contend. This is the main event. Jane gazed at the invitation. 2 weeks, 14 days to forge herself into a person her mother could no longer break, someone capable of facing a crowd and delivering her truth without collapsing. The notion felt insurmountable, yet so had the simple act of breathing just weeks prior. "All right," she exhaled. "Let's begin." Marco's demeanor softened, revealing a trace of something akin to approval. Then our preparations commenced. The ensuing 14 days became an exercise in relentless focus. Jane's entire existence adopted a new cadence, initially strange, but ultimately essential. Mornings were spent with Riza in the gymnasium, learning to command her physical space rather than shrink from it. Afternoons were with Sarah, excavating the ruins of her past. Evenings were with Marco, a crash course in the intricate power dynamics of Chicago's elite. "Identify this man, beatsakes," Marco would demand, presenting a photograph of a silver-haired man in an extravagant suit. Jane responded instantly. "Richard Carmichael, proprietor of 3 downtown hotels, sits on my mother's charity board, is married to a much younger woman, and conceals a gambling addiction." "Excellent. And this one?" A second image, this time of a woman with severe cheekbones and an all-seeing gaze. "Patricia Weston, a titan of real estate who harbors a deep animosity for my mother behind a veneer of civility. They are adversaries, competing for the same high-value patrons." Marco set the photos aside, a flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. "You are learning the landscape. It feels like preparing for an examination I never chose to take. That is precisely its nature. But should you fail, your mother prevails." He poured a measure of coffee Elena had left, sliding a cup toward Jane. "These individuals, they are all predators. They will court your mother so long as she is advantageous, but they will turn on her the moment she shows weakness. Our task is merely to inflict the first wound." Jane cupped her hands around the mug's warmth. "And you are certain this will be effective? That my word will hold more weight than hers?" "They will be left with no alternative, not when they are presented with the financial records." Marco pivoted his laptop for her to see. The display was a sea of ledgers, communications, and files Jane had never before witnessed. "My associates have been thorough. For 7 years, your mother has treated this foundation as her private treasury. Ghost employees, fraudulent expenditures, contributions that simply vanish. The proof is all here." As Jane navigated the files, a wave of nausea washed over her. How did no one notice this? Because her narrative was too compelling to question. She is captivating, almost hypnotic. She spins a beautiful story about saving children while looking impeccable in a couture gown. Marco's tone became glacial, but a compelling story is only viable until confronted with an undeniable truth, and you will be the one to deliver it at the gala. "We will, as a team." Marco closed the laptop with a decisive snap. "But the entire strategy hinges on your readiness, on your capacity to stand before her and remain unbroken when she meets your eyes." Jane held his stare. "I will not break." "You believe that at this moment, but she is aware of every vulnerability you possess. She has spent 26 years cataloging your every psychological trigger." "Then I will have to be more formidable than her intelligence." Jane set her cup down, her expression resolute. "I am not the same person she sold 2 weeks ago. You ensured that." A complex emotion crossed Marco's face, perhaps pride, perhaps worry. "Just recall, this is not about settling a score. It is about pursuing justice." "Is there a distinction?" Jane could taste the acid in her own question. From where I stand, they appear identical. Marco settled back in his chair, studying her. Revenge is an emotional act. It is a conflagration that burns intensely but quickly extinguishes itself. Justice is a framework. It endures, and it reconstructs what has been torn down. He paused. Your mother has stripped you of everything. We are not merely reclaiming it. We are ensuring she is incapable of inflicting this upon anyone else ever again. His words resonated deep within her. He was correct. This was larger than her personal suffering, more significant than the harm her mother had inflicted upon her. Others were being deceived. Others who had bought into the fabrication, and perhaps other girls who were just like her. All right, she breathed. For justice, then. The days compressed into a singular, focused training sequence. Jane's ribs mended sufficiently for her to move without pain. Her work with Risa evolved from defensive tactics to expressions of pure power, each impact forging a core of steel where fear had resided. Sarah coached her to recognize her mother's insidious voice in her own mind, and to silence it, substituting it with affirmations of her own worth. And Marco remained a constant, quiet presence. He would appear at the gym to observe her training, offering a minor correction to her stance. He would share dinner with her, simply absorbing her accounts of the struggle to dismantle a lifetime of conditioning. He never spoke of a debt, never implied she was beholden to him for any of this. This absence of obligation fostered a level of trust she had never afforded another person. Just 5 days prior to the gala, Elena entered Jane's room carrying 3 garment bags. Mr. DeLuca commissioned these for you, she announced, arranging them in the wardrobe. For the function. Jane unzipped the first bag and drew a sharp breath. The gown within was the color of a starless midnight sky, tailored with clean, powerful lines. A stark contrast to the ornamental dresses her mother had forced upon her. This was attire for a woman, not an accessory. It projected authority without a single word. It is breathtaking, Jane whispered. Put it on. We must check the fit. Jane slipped into the silk, the fabric settling against her as if it were a second skin. It was not restrictive, but substantial. She faced the mirror and saw a complete stranger. The last of her bruises had faded to faint, yellowish marks. A professional had shaped her hair into an actual style, not a chaotic tangle. She appeared to be a person of consequence. He possesses fine taste, Elena observed, adjusting a minor seam. He always has. Jane turned, examining this new reflection. What is the true motivation behind all of this? Elena's expression became tinged with sorrow. That is a question for him. But if I were to venture a guess, I would say you remind him of someone, or perhaps of a version of himself from a very long time ago. Elena smoothed an invisible crease, her words landing with quiet force. Mr. DeLuca is not a man who offers aid casually, but when he commits, it is with 100% certainty. You are fortunate. Jane did not feel fortunate. You are alive, are you not? And you are poised to dismantle the very person who wished you erased. That is not fortune, child. That is survival. After Elena departed, Jane confronted her reflection. The woman staring back was a specter of cold resolve, a stark departure from the shattered figure of 2 weeks prior. Yet beneath the designer fabric and immaculate hair, she felt it, the persistent, cold knot of terror lying in wait. What if the sight of her mother paralyzed her? What if this entire fortress of preparation crumbled the instant they shared the same space? A knock on the door broke her reverie. It was Marco. Jane admitted him. He wore his customary expensive suit, yet his expression seemed less guarded than usual. Elena informed me the dress was a perfect fit. It is, thank you. He dismissed her gratitude with a wave. That is unimportant. There is something you must see. He guided her to another floor, beyond a door secured by a key card and a biometric scanner. The room inside was a nerve center from a spy film, a constellation of screens, humming servers, and a pair of technicians who acknowledged them with a nod. This is the operations center, Marco stated, where we compiled the gala presentation. It is crucial you see it beforehand to be prepared. A young analyst summoned a file onto the central monitor. It was a curated collection of damnation. The video began with her mother's public persona, at charitable functions, smiling for cameras, speaking of protecting the vulnerable. Then the facade was violently torn away. Financial statements scrolled past, marked with glaring red indicators. Illicit transfers, clandestine accounts, and communiques discussing the silencing of dissenters. Following this were the photographs. A small, bruised Jane, school portraits in which the pain was a silent scream in her eyes. Then Marco's team presented its most damning evidence. Sealed medical records, page after page, chronicling years of concealed abuse that had been systematically overlooked. The culminating piece was the life insurance policy, annotated with notes that laid bare its true purpose, the financial motive, the expected payout, the designated timeline. The screen faded to black. Jane's hands were trembling. You uncovered all of this. The majority was already in the open. We merely established the connections. Marco indicated the technology. This will broadcast across every screen for 4 minutes, long enough to seal her fate, yet brief enough to hold every gaze. Jane countered, she will deny all of it. Denials are meaningless against proof, this absolute. Marco's voice was like forged metal. The media storm will be immediate. An inquiry is inevitable. Her powerful friends will vanish. Her entire world is set to detonate. Jane gazed at the dormant screen, recognizing it as an armament. I want to append something, she stated. Marco lifted a brow. What? A direct statement from me following the video's conclusion. Jane met his gaze directly. I want to face that camera and articulate in my own terms precisely what she did. Jane, that isn't necessary. It is for me. Her voice was pure steel. You spoke of justice. Justice requires the victim's voice to be heard. It is my time to speak. Marco observed her for a long, weighty moment before nodding. All right, we film it tomorrow. A single take without error. You must execute it perfectly. I will. That night, Jane drafted and redrafted her address, excising any word that hinted at weakness or rage, any trace of the broken child her mother had forged. The resulting script was stark, truthful, and utterly destructive. They filmed it the following day. It was simply her, seated, addressing the camera. No cosmetics to conceal the fading scars, no pages in her hands. Only Jane, her eyes fixed upon the lens. My name is Jane Whitmore, she started, her voice unwavering. The woman you know as the philanthropist Charlotte Whitmore is the same individual who assaulted me, controlled me, and sold my existence to a stranger because she valued my death over my life. All that you witnessed tonight is fact. Every file, every photograph. This is her true nature, and my silence is over. When she concluded, the room was utterly still. The cameraman whispered, "Wow," and departed quickly. Marco stood with folded arms, his face impassive. Was it excessive? Jane inquired. No, it was flawless. His voice was hoarse. There is absolutely no recovering from this for her. Good, Jane replied, rising on unsteady legs. That is the entire objective. 3 days prior to the gala, her mother initiated her countermove. Jane was in the gym with Reese when Elena materialized, her expression tense. Jane, you're needed upstairs immediately. The cold edge in Elena's voice was a clear warning. Jane trailed her to Marco's office, finding him by the window with a phone pressed to his ear, his posture rigid. I don't give a damn what warrant you claim to possess. You will not enter this property without... He fell silent, listening. In that case, I will meet you at the precinct with my attorney. He ended the call and faced Jane. Your mother contacted the police. She claims I abducted you. They are here for a wellness visit. A knot of dread formed in Jane's stomach. Are they allowed to do that? They can attempt it legally, but it will go nowhere. You are an adult, here by choice. They have no case. Marco's jaw was like stone. This is her strategy. She aims to corner you, compelling a choice between her and escalating this conflict. I am not returning, Jane declared, her voice alight with defiance. Regardless of their demands, I will not go. Good. We confront this directly. You will speak to the officers, confirm you are well, here willingly, and that she is the actual menace. Marco stepped nearer. Can you manage this without breaking? Jane reflected on the past 2 weeks, the conditioning, the therapy, the effort to forge this new self. I can. Perfect. She anticipates your collapse. Let us demonstrate how mistaken she is. Within an hour, 2 officers occupied a conference room. Marco and his lawyer sat on one side, Jane on the other, her hands clasped to conceal their trembling. The senior officer, a woman with weary eyes, addressed Jane. Miss Whitmore, a report suggests you are being held here against your will. Is this accurate? No, Jane replied, her voice remarkably firm. I am here of my own volition. Your mother believes differently. She is extremely worried about you. A cynical laugh nearly broke free from Jane. My mother is worried about her public persona, nothing more. The younger officer leaned in. She presented your social media, noting your weeks of silence. That isn't typical for someone who is safe. What isn't typical, Jane retorted, is a mother who batters her child, then files a fraudulent missing person report to hide her crimes. She rolled up her sleeves, revealing the fading contusions. She caused these, and worse before that. I am here because Marco DeLuca offered me sanctuary when my own mother tried to orchestrate my death. The 2 officers exchanged a look. The woman produced a notepad. That is an extremely grave allegation. It is also the truth, and I have documentation, medical files, witnesses, and the life insurance policy she purchased for me. Jane held the officer's gaze. Investigate my history, speak with my former doctors. You will recognize the pattern. They questioned her for another 20 minutes. By the conclusion, both appeared deeply troubled. The older one gave Jane a business card. If you require assistance, call this number, Victim Services. I am receiving help now, Jane said, looking at Marco. I am precisely where I need to be. After their departure, the lawyer gave a thumbs up. You managed that expertly. They will not return. But Jane understood. Her mother was not finished. She would find a different, more vicious method of attack. Jane was correct. The next morning, her phone vibrated her awake. It was a new device with a new number known by only a handful of people. The text came from a blocked source. Do you feel secure? Do you believe he can truly shield you? You are still my daughter. You will forever belong to me. The phone felt like a block of ice in her grip. She showed it to Marco without delay. His expression hardened. She is probing, attempting to unnerve you before the event. It is effective, Jane confessed, despising the tremor in her voice. Marco took the phone, forwarded the text, then returned it. Fear is her final tool. Do not grant her that victory. He squeezed her shoulder. Just one more day. Endure one more day, and it will be over. Jane nodded, but the text message tormented her. She lay awake, unable to sleep, envisioning her mother's reaction when the video aired. Would she erupt, retaliate, or somehow warp the situation to cast herself as the victim once more? On the morning of this gala, Jane rose before sunrise, moving like an automaton. She followed her regimen: water, coffee, Sarah's breathing techniques. Reese arrived for a final session focused not on combat, but on maintaining composure. You are completely prepared for this, Reese assured her. Recall all our work. Enter that space as if you own it. Never apologize. You are in control now. Jane feels a final surge of panic, convinced she will falter. But Reese reassures her, you are prepared. He instructs her to simply breathe and refocus if she loses her footing. Reese's hand on her shoulder is a firm anchor. He tells her she is far more resilient than she believes. Go be a commander. Later, Elena comes to manage her preparation. The gown, shoes, and understated jewelry were all selected by Marco. Her hair is drawn back severely, concealing nothing. The makeup is minimal. She is there for a purpose, not a performance. When Jane sees her reflection, a cold, hard stranger stares back, poised, dangerous. And Marco is waiting just outside. The man wore a black tuxedo that cost a fortune, looking every inch the powerful figure he was. But her appearance made him pause for an instant. He began to speak, then recalibrated. When you enter that hall, every person there will understand who you are. That is the objective, correct? Yes, but I doubt you comprehend the aura of power you currently project. He presented his arm. Ready? Jane accepted it, feeling his steadfast presence beside her, as I will ever be. The entire affair was at the Grand Marquis Hotel, one of Chicago's most opulent venues. They arrived strategically late, after the room was full. The lobby was awash in designer attire, thick with the scent of wealth. Jane felt the collective gaze of the room fasten on her as they entered. Marco's hand remained steady on her back, a quiet assurance of his support. Moving through the crowd, she identified the key figures from her research. Richard Carmichael was near the bar. Patricia Weston was networking by the windows. And at the epicenter, encircled by admirers and press, stood Charlotte Whitmore. Her mother appeared flawless as ever, an immaculate dress, a neck adorned with diamonds, and a smile so polished it seemed artificial. She was speaking to a journalist when she noticed Jane. The smile froze. For a brief moment, utter astonishment fractured her perfect facade. Then it vanished, concealed behind a frigid stare. Their eyes met from across the vast chamber. Charlotte excused herself and began to advance toward them, a predator closing the distance. Jane's heart pounded, her every instinct urging her to flee. Yet she stood her ground, compelling herself to breathe, to recall the weapon she had become over 14 days. Jane. Her mother's voice was cloyingly sweet, pitched for the surrounding crowd to hear. Thank heavens, I was so dreadfully worried. She moved in for a false embrace. Jane took one precise step back beyond her reach. "Do not touch me." A coldness entered Charlotte's eyes, but the synthetic smile remained fixed. "My dear, this discussion should happen in private." "No." The word is not a refusal, but a declaration forged in steel. "We are going nowhere, and this isn't happening in private. Whatever you have to say, you can say it right here." A ripple of awareness moves through the assembly. A drama is unfolding. Phones emerge, lenses turning toward the schism. Charlotte's smile becomes a brittle facade. "Jane, you are clearly not well. This man has poisoned your mind." "Marco preserved my life. You sought to extinguish it." Jane feels the pressure of Marco's hand on her back, a silent buttress of support. "I am aware of the insurance policy. I know I was sent to him for my own execution. I know everything." For a fleeting moment, the mask of Charlotte's composure disintegrates, exposing the unadulterated rage beneath. A laugh follows, a sound so meticulously practiced it verges on the grotesque. "That's absurd! You've been fed a litany of lies. The sole purveyor of falsehoods here is you." Jane's voice amplifies with each syllable. "And in approximately 30 seconds, every individual in this room will understand the kind of monster you truly are." Charlotte opens her mouth for a retort, but the ballroom lights descend into darkness. The colossal screens surrounding them erupt to life, and the performance commences. Jane observes her mother's face as a lifetime of sordid secrets is broadcast across every monitor. She witnesses the color drain from her complexion, her eyes dilating in pure panic as financial records and images of Jane's childhood abuse scroll past. Then the insurance policy materializes on every screen. A profound silence has fallen over the entire ballroom. As Jane's recorded testimony begins, her own visage filling the monitors, her voice resolute and clear, Charlotte finally fractures. She pivots from one screen to the next, searching for an escape that does not exist. "Turn it off!" she hisses to someone nearby. "Turn it off this instant!" Yet no one complies. They are all transfixed. The reporters, the affluent donors, the members of the board, every person who once venerated her and granted her power. The video concludes. The screens go black. In the crushing stillness, Charlotte Whitmore stands isolated in the room's center, her meticulously constructed world completely demolished. And Jane, for the first time in her existence, is liberated from fear. The silence stretches for what feels like an eternity. Then a glass falls. Its shattering sound on the floor breaks the spell. A collective movement follows. Charlotte lunges toward the nearest reporter. "This is a fabrication, all of it. That man—" She aims a trembling finger at Marco. "He is a monster. He coerced her into this." "I possess copies of everything." Marco's serene voice cuts through her hysteria. "Financials authenticated by 3 independent forensic accountants. Medical records from 4 separate hospitals. The insurance policy filed with your signature, dated, and notarized." He produces a flash drive from his pocket, raising it for all to see. Any journalist desiring the complete file is welcome to it, at no cost. A dozen hands ascend. Charlotte's pallor shifts to a furious crimson. "You cannot do this. I will sue you for defamation, for slander, for broadcasting the truth." Jane's voice is soft, yet it resonates. She steps forward, emerging from Marco's shadow to stand independently. "You can attempt it, but we both know what they would uncover." Her mother's eyes lock with hers, and within them Jane sees only raw desperation. "Jane, please, I am your mother. I love you. Everything I ever did was... Do not. The word is an impassable wall, absolute. Do not dare feign that any of it was for my benefit. You did it for yourself. You have only ever acted for yourself. Charlotte's features contort into something hideous. The mask is gone, disintegrated by panic and fury. You ungrateful little creature. After all I provided for you, you provided nothing but scars. Jane's voice is perfectly stable, the tremors vanquished. And I am finished carrying them on your behalf. A camera flashes, then another. The press captures every second of Charlotte's public immolation. Jane can see the narrative shifting in real time, as each word her mother speaks becomes another nail in her own coffin. Richard Carmichael pushes through the throng, his face livid. Charlotte, is any of this authentic? Have you been embezzling from the foundation? Richard, I am able to explain. Can you explain $2 million in offshore accounts? Patricia Weston materializes beside him, phone in hand. Because my accountant just transmitted the records, I am viewing the transfers this very moment. Her smile is as sharp as a razor. It is remarkable how much of our charity funding found its way to the Cayman Islands. Charlotte's mouth opens and closes, but no sound emerges. She searches the room for an ally, but every face that returns her gaze reflects the same emotion. Shock, revulsion, and betrayal. The very individuals who lauded her an hour before are now recoiling from the wreckage. This is not concluded, Charlotte hisses, turning back to Jane. You believe you have triumphed? You are nothing. You have always been nothing. Then she gestures wildly toward Marco. And when he tires of you, when he discards you like the refuse you are, you will have nowhere else to turn. No one will have you. The words are a poison expertly crafted, targeting every old wound. Jane feels the familiar panic begin to rise within her. The voice inside her whispers that her mother might be correct, that perhaps she is without worth. But then Marco's hand finds her own, warm, steady, and tangible. And with that connection, the panic recedes. Jane studies her mother, truly sees her, and perceives not the titan of her childhood, but a small, vicious woman whose power was constructed upon making others feel insignificant. Without that power, without the fear she wielded as a weapon, Charlotte Whitmore is merely pathetic. You are correct about one thing, Jane says gently. I was nothing. You ensured that. But I am no longer that person. And you? Her gaze sweeps over the ruined woman. You are precisely what you have always been. The only distinction is that now everyone else is able to see it as well. Charlotte opens her mouth, but is silenced by a new voice from the crowd's edge. Charlotte Whitmore. Two men in suits navigate through the spectators, displaying badges. Detectives. Jane recognizes one from Marco's files, a man who owed him a favor, positioned here on standby. We have some inquiries regarding financial irregularities at the Children's Foundation. You will need to accompany us. I am not going anywhere. Charlotte's voice escalates to a shriek. This is harassment. I possess rights. You have the right to remain silent, the detective states calmly. I would recommend you exercise it. It was not an arrest, not yet. It was simply an invitation she was unable to decline. But the oblivious guests perceived none of the true narrative. They merely observed the surreal spectacle of Charlotte Whitmore being escorted from her own gala by police, her perfect image utterly incinerated. Jane watched her mother being led through the doors and felt a vast emptiness open within her. It was not relief, not precisely. It was the void left by a burden she had borne for so long she had forgotten its presence. Marco's hand still held hers. She looked up at him as he watched her, his expression inscrutable. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. "I have no idea," she replied with stark honesty. "Inquire again tomorrow." The ballroom descended into complete chaos. Reporters yelling, board members arguing, and guests stampeding towards the exits. The music ceased. The party had officially imploded. Patricia Weston materialized from the crowd, her eyes gleaming with cold opportunism. "Mr. DeLuca, Ms. Whitmore, that was quite a presentation." "It was not a presentation," Jane retorted. "It was the truth." Even better. Patricia's grin was purely predatory. "The Foundation's board will require a new leader, someone with a spine. I am proposing your name, Jane, should you be interested." Jane could only stare, completely astounded. "I do not know the first thing about managing a charity." "You know what it is to need assistance and be denied. That makes you more qualified than any of these vultures." Patricia surveyed the room with utter contempt. "Consider it. We will speak next week." She vanished before Jane could formulate a response. Marco guided her toward a side exit, away from the clamoring mob and flashing cameras. In the quiet of a corridor, Jane finally drew a proper breath. Her hands were trembling. Her legs felt insubstantial. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the confrontation had now crashed, leaving a profound void. "I need to sit down," she whispered. Marco located a bench for her. She placed her head between her knees, attempting to concentrate on Sarah's breathing technique. "In for 4, hold out for 4. "You did the absolute right thing," Marco said, seating himself beside her. "Far more than right." "I feel as though I might be sick." "That is to be expected. You just confronted the monster that has shadowed your entire life. Your body is only now beginning to process the shock." A shaky laugh escaped her. "Is that your professional assessment?" "I have been in a few conflicts. You learn to recognize the quiet that follows the storm." His voice was low. "Just breathe." For a long while, she simply sat there with him, his solid presence an anchor, while chaos raged in the ballroom. Gradually, her hands ceased their shaking. Her breathing stabilized. The world stopped spinning so violently. "What happens now?" she asked. "The police will construct their case. The board will commence its own deep dive into the finances. The media will feast on her for weeks." Marco's tone was strictly business. "The life your mother knew is finished. The empire she erected is poised to crumble into dust." "And what of me?" "That is now for you to decide." He turned, looking directly at her. "You are free, Jane. Genuinely. Your life is at last your own." The word felt foreign. Freedom. A future not dictated by another's cruelty. She had spent so much energy merely surviving that she never learned how to truly live. "I do not know what I want," she confessed. "Then it is time for you to discover it. You have the time." Marco rose to his feet, offering a hand. "We must make a tactical exit before the media swarm this corridor." They slipped through a service door, evading the press corps, massed at the main entrance. Marco's vehicle was waiting, its engine humming. Once they were seated inside, the car slid into traffic, leaving the evening's chaos behind them. Jane saw Chicago's skyline streak by, a tapestry of illumination and shadow. This city was meant to be her home, yet it had always felt more like a cage. Now, as her mother's empire crumbled, she pondered the sensation of truly belonging. "Thank you," she offered, her tone subdued. For all of it. The gesture encompassed their entire ordeal. Marco's face remained a mask. Reserve your gratitude. The most difficult chapter is yet to come. What do you mean by that? Your mother will retaliate. She possesses lawyers, influential allies, and untraced funds. This conflict is not concluded by a single defeat. He held her gaze. Are you prepared for that? For a protracted war of attrition? Jane considered the prospect. Her mother, when cornered, behaved like a predator, deploying lies, manipulation, and victimhood to reclaim dominance. It would be a grueling, soul-crushing campaign. Yet the person she was 2 weeks prior had ceased to exist. In her place stood someone who understood how to stand tall, absorb a blow, and meet a gaze without flinching. She possessed a resilience neither of them knew she had. Yes, she affirmed, I'm prepared. The car arrived at Marco's high-rise. They ascended in the elevator without a word, and he escorted her to her apartment door. Get some rest, he advised. Tomorrow will be a deluge of media inquiries, legal formalities, and opportunists seeking a claim to your new reality. A feeling of dread coiled in her stomach. I have no desire to become the headline. That is no longer your choice. You are the narrative. His voice, however, was gentle. Elena will field the calls. Concentrate on yourself. Contact Sarah. Absorb what's happened. Don't allow them to dictate your pace. And your plans? A faint smile touched Marco's lips. To ensure there are no legal vulnerabilities. To certify the evidence is unassailable. To see that she answers for her actions. He paused. And to guarantee your safety, her desperation makes her dangerous. Do you believe she would actually do something? I believe she has nothing left to forfeit. Individuals in that state make reckless choices. His jaw tensed. But she will not reach you. I will see to it. She began to insist on her own capability, but then hesitated. In truth, the knowledge of his protection was a comfort, representing a degree of trust she had never placed in anyone. All right, she murmured. I will be cautious. Good. He turned to depart, then stopped. Jane, your actions back there, confronting her. Few people possess that kind of courage. You have every right to be proud. He left before she could respond. Jane entered, secured the door, and rested against it. She had expected a sense of triumph, but felt only a profound weariness. It was an exhaustion that settled deep in her bones, turning the simple act of changing her clothes into a monumental task. She succeeded, swapping the gown for sleepwear and removing her makeup. The mirror reflected her face once more. Simply Jane, not the decorated puppet from the gala, nor the shattered girl from before, but a new identity beginning to emerge. Her phone vibrated with a message from Sarah. I saw the story. I'm here for you, anytime, anything. A slight smile formed on her lips. She lacked the energy to speak, but a brief text of thanks felt appropriate. Sleep seemed a distant possibility, yet the moment her head touched the pillow, she was lost to oblivion. She remained in a heavy, dreamless state until Elena arrived late the next morning, carrying coffee and the update that her phone was overwhelmed. Journalist, Elena stated, placing the tray on a table. Attorneys, strangers asserting a familial connection. I am managing the influx. Is there anyone I am required to speak with? Only if you wish to. Mr. DeLuca's instructions are for you to take the day to recover. The world will be held at bay. But the world was not inclined to wait. Jane had barely started her coffee when Marco appeared, his expression like granite. We have a complication. A cold dread settled in her stomach. What sort of complication? Your mother posted bail an hour ago. She is scheduled to hold a press conference this afternoon. He offered her his phone. A news banner articulated Charlotte Whitmore's new narrative. She was the true victim, framed by a daughter who had been manipulated by criminals in a grand conspiracy. The color drained from Jane's face. She will lie. She will cast herself as a martyr. That is her predictable final gambit. Marco retrieved his device. The strategic question is whether we counterattack or allow her to destroy her own credibility. What is your recommendation? She is banking on your silence, on your retreat. She will portray you as fragile, a pawn. His gaze was piercing. Therefore, my counsel is that you appear. Be present. Serve as a reminder of who the actual victim is. Her heart raced. The thought of facing a battery of cameras and accusations was terrifying. Yet this instinct to retreat warred with the knowledge that to concede now would mean forfeiting everything she had gained. Where is this event being held? The Regency Hotel at noon. Marco consulted his watch. That gives us 2 hours. Then we should prepare. This time she selected her own armor, tailored black trousers and a crisp white blouse, her hair secured back. She appeared collected, a woman with nothing to conceal. When Elena's makeup artist had covered the last trace of a bruise, the reflection was of someone she did not recognize at all. Marco stood by the entrance with Reza and 2 other members of his security detail, all poised like sentinels awaiting a storm. Your presence alone is your rebuttal, he said quietly as they walked to the cars. You need not say anything, simply let them see you. But silence felt like surrender, a tacit agreement with the web of falsehoods her mother was about to spin. Someone needed to dismantle that narrative, and it seemed fitting it should be the daughter she had tried to erase. The Regency was a maelstrom of media. Camera flashes, outstretched microphones, and a barrage of shouted questions. Marco's team carved a passage through the tumult, escorting Jane inside without a word exchanged. The press conference occupied a ballroom so densely packed with media that the space felt suffocating. On a raised platform sat Charlotte, performing the role of a bereaved mother flanked by 2 exorbitant lawyers. A stylist had clearly been tasked with creating a soft, sympathetic image, the wronged matriarch, and she inhabited the part perfectly. The instant Jane entered, Charlotte's entire performance faltered for a fraction of a second, revealing a flash of raw fury before the mask was restored. Marco and Jane took seats near the back, refusing to be relegated to the shadows. Lenses pivoted toward them as Jane, outwardly serene, prepared to witness her mother's public deception. Charlotte's lead counsel began, reciting a litany of prepared legal denials and threatening litigation against Marco DeLuca. Then Charlotte approached the microphone. I wish to begin by stating my profound love for my daughter, she started, her voice trembling with calculated emotion. For years, Jane has battled with her mental wellness. I have exhausted every option to secure her the help she requires. But she recently became the victim of an individual who exploited her vulnerable condition. Jane's jaw set. Beneath the table, Marco's hand rested on hers, a firm anchor in a sea of fabrication. The man here today, Marco DeLuca, is a documented criminal, Charlotte declared, her voice gaining strength. He commands one of Chicago's most perilous organizations, and for his own perverse reasons, he targeted my daughter. He has warped her mind and is now wielding her as an instrument against her own family. A reporter raised a hand. Mrs. Whitmore, what of the financial discrepancies? Entirely falsified, one of the lawyers interjected smoothly. Our own forensic accountants are reviewing the records. We are certain these are meritless accusations. What about the life insurance policy? Another journalist called out. For a brief moment, Charlotte's eyes became chips of ice before the sorrowful mother facade returned. That was merely prudent estate planning. To twist it into something malicious demonstrates the lengths they will go to ruin me. Jane could tolerate no more. She rose to her feet and with that single action commanded the attention of every camera in the ballroom. All color vanished from Charlotte's face. Jane, my dear, you need not. Yes, Jane's voice cut through the room. I do, because every word you have just spoken is a lie. The space erupted into a storm of flashes and shouted inquiries. The lawyers attempted to regain order but were overwhelmed. The stage now belonged to Jane. I do not suffer from mental health issues, Jane stated, her voice unwavering. I suffer from PTSD, a result of 26 years of abuse by that woman. I have documentation for every fractured bone, every contusion, every emergency room visit she dismissed as a childhood mishap. Jane, please, Charlotte implored, rising with her arms outstretched as if to pacify a frantic child. Do not approach me. Do not feign concern. Jane's hands trembled, but her voice was solid. You sent me to Marco DeLuca to be murdered for $2 million. That is not affection. That is not protection. It is attempted homicide. An attorney moved toward her. Miss Whitmore, you're clearly distressed. We should pause. I am not distressed. I am through with silence. Jane pivoted, addressing the assembled press. My mother is a predator who has siphoned funds from her own charity. For decades, she has tormented me, and now she performs victimhood because she was exposed. Do not be misled. It is a brilliant spectacle, but nothing more. The carefully constructed mask on Charlotte's face fractured. You thankless, she began, checking herself and restoring her gentle tone. Jane, that man has poisoned you against me, but I remain your mother. I will always love you, regardless of what he's led you to believe. Marco led me to believe nothing. You did. With every blow, every degradation, every moment, you conditioned me to accept my own suffering. Jane's voice faltered, but she persisted. The only thing Marco demonstrated was that healing was possible, and that I need not live in fear. She then turned and exited the ballroom, Marco and his men forming a protective cordon around her. In their wake, chaos erupted. Jane reached the car just as her strength failed. She fell into the seat, gasping for air as the wave of adrenaline struck her. Marco was beside her. Breathe. You are secure. Just breathe. I couldn't allow her. She continued to lie, and I understand. You did what was necessary. His voice was a placid anchor. You spoke your truth. That is what counts. Jane centered herself on her breathing, and gradually the world ceased its frantic turning. When she should speak, she met Marco's gaze. What happens now? A stark smile formed on his lips. Now we let the truth perform its work. The consequences were immediate. Within hours, the story became a firestorm across Chicago's news networks. Jane's public denunciation replaying endlessly. The Foundation's board convened an emergency session, suspending Charlotte immediately. 3 principal donors publicly withdrew their support. Law enforcement confirmed a formal investigation into the embezzlement was underway. From the sanctuary of Marco's tower, Jane observed the empire her mother founded on deceit begin to crumble. Sarah arrived that evening for an urgent session. For 2 hours, they discussed trauma, the act of confronting an abuser, and the void that follows a battle for justice. It was cathartic. The following morning, Charlotte's attorneys called to propose a settlement. "What kind of arrangement?" Jane inquired. Marco, opposite her at the table, was visibly repulsed. "The kind where she concedes nothing, yet is legally forbidden from contacting you. In exchange, you would decline to pursue criminal prosecution." The coffee grew cold in Jane's hands. "She wants me to grant her impunity. She wants to avoid incarceration?" "Precisely," Marco's voice conveyed his disdain. "What is your recommendation?" "This is your decision," he stated, reclining in his seat. "If you desire her imprisoned, the evidence exists, but that path involves a trial, months, perhaps years. You would testify, re-experience everything, confront her." Jane considered the proposition. The vision of a courtroom, her mother's counsel dissecting her trauma before a jury, the media frenzy, the court of public opinion. She had only just reclaimed her freedom. Did she wish to shackle herself to that conflict for the foreseeable future? "And if I accept the settlement, she vanishes. A court order ensures her distance. The foundation will disown her. Her reputation, career, and wealth will be lost. She evades prison, but her constructed reality is terminated." Jane gazed into her cup. Incarceration was one form of justice, but perhaps watching her mother exist in the wreckage she created was a justice of its own. Perhaps that would suffice. Perhaps self-immolation was not required to ensure her mother's downfall. "I will accept the terms," she said quietly, "with a single condition." "State it." "I require her to confess to all of her actions in a signed affidavit. A comprehensive and absolute admission of guilt, the abuse, the embezzlement, the insurance fraud, every transgression, and should she harm another, the confession goes public." Marco's smile was razor sharp. "My legal team will prepare the document." Within a week, it was finalized. Charlotte Whitmore signed a 20-page chronicle of her offenses. She relinquished her foundation. She submitted to a permanent order of protection. She surrendered her assets to compensate for her theft. In exchange, Jane would not press charges. An unnatural quiet descended. After a life defined by fear, the conflict ended with ink on a page. As Jane's gaze fell upon her mother's signature at the confession, a long-held tension within her finally eased. The ordeal had concluded. In the subsequent weeks, Charlotte Whitmore's life unraveled, just as Marco had foreseen. The scandal became her defining narrative. Allies abandoned her. The philanthropic community ostracized her. Her single attempt to claim coercion was nullified when Jane's counsel threatened to make the confession public. Following this, Charlotte vanished from public life entirely. Reports from Marco's network indicated her mother was residing in an obscure town, an unknown figure starting from nothing. The precise destiny she had always held over Jane. The irony was palpable, yet her mother was fading into the past. For the first time, Jane was attending to her own internal compass, inquiring into her own identity. This inquiry guided her 3 months later to a dilapidated warehouse in South Chicago, seeking a new beginning amidst its decay. The structure was derelict. Shattered windows, sprawling water damage, and decades of profound neglect gave it the air of a crime scene. Yet it belonged to her. Each square foot was acquired with the settlement funds her mother was forced to relinquish, every dollar a token of restitution. "Are you certain of this?" Marco murmured at her side, surveying the wreckage. No, Jane confessed softly, but I am proceeding regardless. She had fleetingly weighed another path, a position on a foundations board, an infinite loop of meetings and fundraising, the sterile, predictable mechanics of philanthropy. It was undoubtedly significant work, and it was undeniably vital. In those formal boardrooms, the term vulnerable women was discussed as an abstract concept. For Jane, it was a visceral reality. She could not wage this war from a distance. She needed to construct something tangible, a place that might have saved her. A sanctuary, not a cold fluorescent institution with prison-like regulations. This would be a refuge for women to reconstruct their lives, an idea born from a conversation with Sarah. While mapping her recovery, Jane described Marco's home as a sanctuary. She spoke of the security, of Elena providing meals unprompted, of Rasa transforming her into a warrior in the gym. She recalled the therapy that finally muted her mother's internal voice. Imagine if other women had access to this, Jane suddenly proposed. Not just a cot and a file, genuine support. Sarah simply smiled. Then it is you who must create it. And so she stood before a ruin, envisioning it filled with vitality. Marco was already on his phone. I have a contractor. He is indebted to me. I will have a team here by morning for an assessment. Marco, that is not necessary. I know, he interjected, his tone soft. I want to. This is a worthy endeavor. Permit me to assist. Jane understood that protesting was futile. The past 3 months had revealed the man beneath the reputation. A fellow survivor who understood, who valued resilience, and whose promise was unbreakable. His loyalty was absolute, and he harbored a weakness for hopeless causes. She also realized she trusted him implicitly, a sensation that was both unnerving and profoundly stabilizing. All right, she eventually conceded. Thank you. Marco placed the call. An hour later, a gruff man named Frank appeared, clad in work boots and speaking in clipped phrases to survey the site. Jane trailed him, recording notes, attempting to grasp the project's immense scale. Frank enumerated the critical failures, structural, electrical, plumbing, all compromised. This is a colossal undertaking, Frank stated, but the framework is sound. A solid base. It could be remarkable if executed properly. What is the projected timeline? 6 months for a rush job, 8 to do it proper. Frank was already drawing in a worn notebook. And then there is the bureaucratic ordeal of acquiring permits. But it is feasible. A resolve ignited within Jane, a feeling of hope, of purpose. Let's proceed properly, Frank simply nodded, already calculating costs. I will have an estimate for you by Friday. After his departure, they lingered in the nascent main hall, enveloped by dust and memory. You are truly proceeding with this, Marco observed. It was a statement, not an inquiry. Yes, I am, Jane affirmed, turning to him. I know it seems irrational. I am completely inexperienced in these matters, but I must. If I fail to... She sought the right words. If I don't create something from the ruins of what was done to me, then it was all meaningless. This way, it has significance. Marco's expression softened. It already has significance. You endured. That is paramount. Not for me, she answered immediately. Not anymore. She surveyed the vast vacant space. I need to construct something to improve the world I inhabit. Then you shall, he replied, as if stating an inevitability. Jane craved that level of self-assurance, postulating that faith was perhaps an external belief held for you until your own could ignite. The following months became a crucible of bureaucracy, construction, and constant adversity. Jane dedicated her entire being to the project, learning through immersion. She contracted an architect versed in trauma-informed design, gathering insights from social workers, therapists, and fellow survivors. Her vision sharpened as she surveyed other shelters, noting their strengths and failings. This would be no institution, but a home comprised of 12 private havens. It was designed with a large kitchen for communal meals and a therapy room beside a gym, where Risa had offered to teach self-defense. A playroom for children was essential, a feature Jane knew was critical for mothers who felt trapped. She named it Phoenix House, though Elena deemed the name obvious. Jane found its symbolism of rising from ashes to be perfect. Marco remained a quiet facilitator in the periphery, a guardian who empowered without ever controlling. He secured legal counsel for the nonprofit and ensured the construction crews met their deadlines. Some nights he would appear simply to observe the progress, his sharp inquiries revealing a genuine understanding of her mission. "You've changed," he remarked one evening as they reviewed paint samples in the unfinished kitchen. Jane looked up. "How so?" "More centered, as if you have a destination now." He rested against a counter. "When we first met, you were braced for a blow. Now you look prepared to strike back first." "I had a good mentor," Jane replied, placing the samples down. "Several, in fact. Risa taught me to fight. Sarah taught me to heal. Elena showed me that kindness is real." She met his gaze directly. "And you taught me I was worth defending." A complex emotion crossed Marco's face. "Jane, I'm not making this awkward. It's simply the truth." She held a blue paint sample against the wall. "You could have abandoned me that first night. You could have allowed her to win. You chose not to. My presence here is a result of your choice." "You are here because of your choices," Marco corrected her gently. "I only provided the space for you to make them." "A technicality," Jane smirked. "Regardless, thank you." He grew quiet, observing her with that signature intensity before pushing away from the counter. "The blue is superior to the gray," he stated. "It has more warmth." With that, the moment concluded. Yet a definite shift had occurred between them, a new warmth resonating deep within her. Sarah noticed it instantly during their following session. "You appear content," she observed. Jane weighed the word. Content felt too simple. It was more a sense of being on the correct path, finally moving toward a future instead of fleeing a past. "I am building something meaningful," Jane explained. "And Marco, what is developing there?" Jane felt a flush of heat in her face. "Nothing is developing. He is merely assisting me." Sarah's expression conveyed a deep skepticism. "Very well, and how do you feel in his presence?" "Secure, challenged, as if I can be myself without pretense." Jane reflected. Is it irrational to feel this way for a man who is, admittedly, a criminal? "Human connection is rarely so simple," Sarah answered. "You are permitted to care for someone who has shown you goodness," she leaned forward. "But you must consider your future. Is a relationship part of your design, or do you require this time for yourself?" "I have no idea," Jane admitted with a laugh. "I have never witnessed a healthy relationship. I wouldn't know how to begin. Perhaps direct honesty with herself and him was the best approach. But that truth felt like a precipice she was not prepared to leap from, unable even to articulate her own desires." Instead, she immersed herself in Phoenix House, channeling that chaotic energy into selecting tiles, furnishings, and staff. She assembled her team with care. Lisa, a manager who had fled her own abusive spouse and understood the women's needs, 2 counselors specializing in trauma, and a security expert, Riza's suggestion, who designed a system that ensured safety without feeling like a prison. Every decision was deliberate. 6 months into construction, Patricia Weston arrived unannounced. Her critical eyes surveyed every detail, her pointed questions punctuated by small, sharp nods. "This is quality construction," Patricia conceded at last. "You must present this to the Foundation's board. We possess emergency funds for initiatives like this. It could underwrite your first 2 years." Jane was stunned. "You would truly consider it?" "With an exceptional proposal, yes. The Foundation must repair its image after your mother's scandal. Supporting her daughter's project, the very one who exposed her, it casts us as the virtuous ones." Patricia's smile was purely strategic. "Moreover, the project itself is sound." That fact was encouraging. With the board meeting in 3 weeks, Jane entered a state of intense preparation, crafting a presentation that detailed the mission, budget, and projected impact of Phoenix House. Marco acted as her sparring partner, assuming the role of devil's advocate to assail her with the same harsh questions the board would pose. "What distinguishes you from other shelters?" he challenged. "We offer more than a bed. We provide a complete life reconstruction. Therapy, career training, legal aid, childcare, everything required for a woman to truly begin anew, not merely survive." Jane advanced to the next slide. "The existing system is overwhelmed. We are a smaller, more intensive model designed for greater impact." Marco offered an approving nod. "More compelling. Now, what is the long-term strategy?" They rehearsed relentlessly until her entire presentation was second nature. On the day of the meeting, she was fully prepared. The pitch was received even more favorably than she had dared hope. Board members posed difficult questions, but their genuine interest was evident. Patricia intervened at crucial moments, lending an extra layer of authority to Jane's proposals. The final vote was overwhelmingly positive. The Foundation committed to Phoenix House for 2 years, with an option to renew based on results. Jane exited the room feeling a profound sense of release. She contacted Marco immediately. "We secured it. We are fully funded." His response came back, resonant with warmth. "I never doubted it. You were magnificent." I was absolutely petrified. Fear and ability often coexist. She could almost hear his smile over the line. "Congratulations, Jane. You've earned this entirely." After the call, Jane remained in her car for a long while, absorbing the reality. A year prior, she was a specter, a woman so damaged she had forsaken life itself. Now she was directing a nonprofit, poised to open a sanctuary that would rescue countless women from the hell she had endured. The metamorphosis felt surreal, as if it belonged to another's story. But it was hers. She had forged this from nothing but anguish, resolve, and a hope her mother had failed to extinguish. Phoenix House opened its doors on a brisk November morning. Standing in the main common area, its walls a deep, soothing blue, its furniture placed to invite conversation, and sunlight streaming through new, reinforced windows, Jane felt an immense emotion swell within her. It was perfect. Not in a sterile, institutional sense, but with the authentic feeling of a home, a place where healing was possible. Elena had added the final touches, bringing life to the rooms with plants and art. Risa had already installed a heavy bag in the gym, prepared for the self-defense workshops she would lead. Sarah had equipped the therapy suite with comfortable chairs and gentle lighting. Every individual who had helped Jane rebuild her own life had contributed to creating this space for others. And Marco? He arrived that morning, bearing coffee and pastries for the staff, deflecting all credit for his own significant role. "This is your day," he said when she attempted to thank him. "Allow yourself to experience this." The first resident, a 23-year-old named Maria, came that afternoon, a new bruise on her face, a small daughter clinging to her. Lisa welcomed them, guided them to their room, and gently reviewed the house protocols. Jane observed from afar, remembering the bewildering sensation of entering a safe space for the first time. How strange and suspect it felt. Maria's daughter, 4-year-old Sophia, noticed the playroom and gasped softly. "Mama, look, toys!" "You can play, my sweet," Maria whispered. "You are safe now." Jane had to look away to conceal her tears. She found Marco in the kitchen, leaning against a counter with his coffee, granting her the emotional space she required. "Our first residents have arrived," Jane said, her voice thick. "I saw." His tone was soft. "How are you feeling?" "I'm not sure. This feels monumental. What if I can't adequately help her? What if this is all a facade?" "Then you will learn, as you have with everything else." Marco placed his mug on the counter. "Jane, you built this. You have woven something tangible and beautiful from the fabric of your own trauma. That requires a bravery few possess. It is time you stop questioning it." "It's not so simple. For 26 years, my mother ingrained in me that I was worthless. Your mother was mistaken about everything, most of all you." He crossed his arms. "Just observe. This place exists because you willed it into being. That is not worthlessness. That is power." Jane met his gaze, truly seeing him, and experienced a fundamental shift within herself. This man, who had rescued her unasked, who had helped her deconstruct her mother's toxic legacy, who had been a constant through her brutal rebirth and had demanded nothing in return. For months, a silent allegiance to him had formed within her, a truth she refused to name, dismissing it as an entanglement too complex, too visceral for the landscape still scarred by her mother's reign. Yet perhaps Sarah's insight was a compass pointing toward resolution, toward honesty. "Marco, The words faltered, her courage dissolving. He remained a portrait of unshakable patience. "Thank you," she concluded, her voice thin, "for everything, for finding value in me when I saw none." A shadow, perhaps of disappointment, flickered across his features before he offered a simple nod. "Always." The moment had evaporated. Jane returned to her duties, a welter of greetings and management, but the gravity of her unspoken words trailed her for the remainder of the day. Phoenix House reached capacity almost immediately. Women arrived as refugees from their own lives, wounded and haunted, their trauma worn like a heavy, unseen shroud. Jane witnessed their gradual unfurling, their slow acceptance of sanctuary, their dawning belief in deserving more. In each of them, she recognized a fragment of herself, the nervous tick, the reflexive apologies, the instinct to shrink, as if their own existence were a trespass. And she saw them mend as therapy, fellowship, and security performed their deliberate, essential alchemy. Jane watched fractured women rise, their voices gaining timbre, their spines aligning, their spirits reclaiming the will to contend. It was both depleting and extraordinary, precisely as she had envisioned. 3 months on, while toiling late on a grant proposal, Marco materialized in her office doorway. "You're still here," he observed. "As are you." Jane capped her pen. What is it? Marco entered, sealing the door softly behind him. His grave expression sent a current of anxiety through her. There is something I must tell you, he began. Jane steeled herself. All right. I'm leaving it, he stated, the words so plain, yet they detonated in the quiet room. The whole enterprise, the family business. I am finished. Jane could only stare, dumbfounded. What? Why? Because I am done with that existence. I am sickened by the violence, the paranoia, the unending vigil for the next betrayal. He sank into the chair opposite her. The idea has been taking root for some time. Since the night of our first meeting, to be honest. Seeing you reconstruct a life from its own ruins made me understand that I could do the same, that another path was possible. What will you do? Legitimate ventures. I have investments, properties. There is sufficient clean capital for a new beginning. His gaze found hers and held it. And I want to contribute here at Phoenix House. Not with funds. You no longer require that of me. But with security, legal counsel, with the unseen architecture that sustains a place like this. Jane's heart hammered against her ribs. You want to work with me? I want to work with you. For you. In any role that served this mission. He leaned in. Jane, for 20 years, I erected an empire I no longer desire. Observing you create something meaningful revealed the profound emptiness of my own world. I need to be anchored to something real, and I need to be near you as I do it. His confession settled into the space between them. Marco, Jane's voice was barely a whisper. Are you saying what I believe you are? I am telling you that I care for you. I have for months. Assisting you has been the most purposeful act of my life in years. If you feel even a fragment of what I feel, then I must discover what this could become. He paused. But understand this. I'm not the man I was. I am choosing a different existence. For my own sake, yes, but also for yours. Jane rose, moved around the desk, and did the one thing she had longed to do for months. She brought her lips to his. It was tentative at first, a question posed in silence, but as Marco's arms encircled her, it found its profound and certain answer. It felt like arriving in a safe harbor. When they parted, she was breathless. I have wanted to do that for so long, she confessed. Marco's smile was authentic and warm, a universe away from the glacial mask of their first encounter. You should have. I was terrified of destroying this, of what might happen if I lost you. You are not going to lose me, he framed her face with his hands. I am here, Jane. Whatever this evolves into, wherever it leads, I am 100% present. She knew he spoke the truth. This conviction came not from his words, but from the evidence she had witnessed over the last year. Marco DeLuca honored his commitments, and if he declared he was choosing her, choosing this new beginning, he meant it with the full weight of his being. Okay, she breathed out. Then we navigate this together. The subsequent 6 months were an education in reinvention. Marco initiated the arduous process of extricating himself from his organization, transferring authority to his second-in-command, and rendering his departure absolute. It was not a clean extraction. Some perceived it as a deception, a trap, and sought to pull him back into the fold. But his resolve was ironclad, and in time, they relented. He acquired a condo near Phoenix House. He began appearing at dinner, conversing with residents, becoming a quiet, formidable male presence unbound to violence. He was deliberate, almost reverent, never overstepping. Slowly, the women came to trust him as Jane had. Riza found the situation deeply amusing. Never imagined I'd witness Marco DeLuca serving pasta to survivors of abuse. The world is a peculiar place, Marco replied quietly, stirring the sauce. Jane observed him navigating this new terrain, so alien to the one he had abandoned, and a profound tranquility settled in her spirit. This was correct. It was not flawless, nothing ever is, but it was correct where it counted. They proceeded with care, the two of them discovering what a relationship could be when not founded on fear or dominance. He showed her the texture of safety. She showed him that to be vulnerable was not to be weak. Thus, they had their conflicts. Disputes over finances, her demanding work schedule, or his tendency toward overprotectiveness. But the crucial part was this. They learned to argue constructively, to concede fault, and to remain united, even in the midst of chaos. Sarah offered her endorsement, noting, "You're both genuinely making an effort. That's the core of it." Elena was far more direct. "It's about damn time. I predicted this from the start." Risa simply slugged Marco on the shoulder, vowing to shatter his kneecaps if he ever caused Jane pain. He promised she would have the first opportunity if he ever failed. A year later, Jane stands before a capacity crowd, marking the first anniversary of the shelter's opening. The space was teeming with women who had graduated from the program to new lives, alongside current residents, staff, and volunteers. Marco was positioned against the back wall, arms folded, an expression of undiluted pride on his face. "When I began this," Jane started, her voice steady despite the emotion in her throat, "I aimed to construct the sanctuary that might have saved me, a place for women to become more than their trauma, where they could reclaim their narratives, their security, and their own hard-won second chance." Her gaze traveled the room, landing on familiar faces. Maria, who arrived with a bruised face, was now excelling in nursing school. Keisha, once so broken she was silent for a week, now led the support groups. And Amara, who came with 3 children and no prospects, was now maintaining a full-time job while saving for her own home. You all have taught me that healing is not a clean, linear journey. It is chaotic, it is brutal, and at times it feels insurmountable. But it is always worth the struggle. Every single time. Jane's voice finally broke. "Thank you for placing your trust in me. Thank you for possessing the courage to choose yourselves. And thank you for demonstrating that mere survival can evolve into something truly magnificent." The applause erupted like a tidal wave. Women rose to their feet, cheering, some weeping openly. Jane allowed her own tears to fall, uninhibited. When the room finally quieted, she found Marco in the garden out back. He sat on a bench, absorbing the final traces of daylight. "That was on another level," he said as she joined him. "We made something good here. This place would not exist without you. No, I am sure you would have found a way." But his smile was completely sincere. They sat in a comfortable quiet, observing the city begin to glitter as evening descended. "I have been thinking," Marco said at last. "About what? About what comes next? For us?" He shifted to face her entirely. "I love you, Jane. I think I have since you took my hand in my office, prepared for war. I want to build a life with you. A real one." Jane's heart felt as though it turned over in her chest. "Marco, I am not asking." "Not yet. I know we are still defining this." He laced his fingers through hers. but I need you to understand my trajectory. My future includes you. Permanently." Jane just gazed at this man, the one who had rescued her, who had stood by as she reassembled her life, who had fundamentally remade himself for her. She recalled the girl she was a year ago, shattered, silent, and convinced of her own worthlessness. That girl could never have conceived of this. A life constructed from purpose rather than pain, surrounded by allies, and a man who loved her not in spite of her scars, but for the very wars she had waged to earn them. Her whispered words, "I love you too. I want that future," were the articulation of a reclaimed destiny. Marco's kiss was a silent covenant for all they would construct. Looking back at Phoenix House, she saw light pouring from its windows, a physical manifestation of the sanctuary within. There, women were learning their intrinsic value was untouchable by past violations. The maternal attempt to render her a ghost had instead forged something impervious to hate. Jane was a survivor who chose to rise, transmuting her agony into a permanent legacy that would protect countless others. Each woman sheltered there would be a living monument to the brutal axiom Jane discovered. Survival is not the destination, but the starting point. The profound victory is the choice, made daily to truly live. And so Jane Whitmore, no longer a shadow, silent or afraid, became incandescently and finally alive.
Lesson: a person begins to return to life the moment they are seen without being used. He would stage it like a film, rain needling against black glass. Chicago lit like a city holding its breath. A girl delivered like cargo, a man expected to behave like death itself. But the scene turns not with violence, but with attention. He lifts her chin, sees the bruises, and for the first time in perhaps her whole life, someone looks at her injuries not as inconvenience, not as shame, not as strategy, but as evidence of suffering. And there lies the lesson. Many people do not collapse because life is difficult. They collapse because every eye on them is transactional. They are praised for what they provide, punished for what they need, and measured only by function. Jane's tragedy is not merely that she was abused. It is that she was denied personhood. Her hunger, fear, pain, and exhaustion were all edited out by the woman who should have protected her. So when safety arrives, it feels unreal. A room with quiet, food without punishment, rest without suspicion, a doctor who asks before touching. These are small things in theory, cinematic things in practice. Because trauma makes ordinary kindness feel supernatural. He would write the moral in images. A woman who once curled inward now learns to stand straight. A hand that once shook in fear now signs papers that destroy a lie. A child of violence becomes the architect of refuge. This is not merely revenge. It is resurrection with paperwork, bruises, and stubborn breath. The beautiful cruelty of the story is that her mother tried to script her daughter's ending, but instead authored her beginning. And in classic tragic form, the villain is defeated not only by exposure, but by irrelevance. The daughter does not merely survive the house that made her small, she builds a larger house for others. That is what makes the story ache. The truest revenge is not the enemy's humiliation, it is the victim's return to wholeness.